Washington has some big questions to answer this spring.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports' Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thanks for making this your first watch or first listen of the days. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay with us for the Armada Team of the Week later in the episode. Lars, we got a really fun show coming at all the Everydayers today. Before we get there, just a reminder to all the Everydayers, wherever you get this podcast, make sure you subscribe right here on YouTube. Click that little bell so you don't miss when we post a new video. We got all this fun stuff that we're going to drop in throughout the course of the offseason and through spring practice, which is coming up very, very soon. That's going to be the theme of the show today. Lars, we're going to talk about some of the differences that you and I expect in Jedd Fisch's second go-around here at Washington, because it's going to look very, very different when we get out there a week from today, which is also why we're doing this now. We're talking about some players that we're going to keep our eyes on. Could be some new guys, could be some returners. There are a lot of different things we want to talk about. But Lars, there are a lot of big questions that this coaching staff and these players need to answer this spring. And there's no bigger question than, who are the starting 5 offensive linemen?
Yeah, well, in a way, it's like you said, there's his second go around at this. Well, this first go around, he didn't even have a body along the offensive line. I remember asking Jimmy Doherty, like, hey, 4 or 5 QBs too many. And he hinted that, well, they're going to have split fields. So the freshman will probably be on the east field, and Kai and Damon will probably be in the stadium potentially. They'll mix and match and things like that. But that means you also have enough linemen to divide up. That means you have enough units where you're not saying like, hey, like, all right, we got to rotate in, because literally last spring the offensive line was such an issue to the point of where we're talking about, like, wasn't it the defensive line that was taking a knee?
Yeah, they were doing 9-on-9. Yeah, where they had a couple guys take a knee on both sides.
And it was just one of those, like, again, you have to make do with what you got. But that was why it was so imperative that the first 2 transfer portal additions you had were 2 offensive linemen. Now, again, Garen Hatchett obviously made it clear in the interview that I did with him, where he's just looking to have a role. Like, he wasn't coming here expecting to be the starting guard, left guard, right guard, either one. But he is. I would expect him to be in the 2 teams. He is going to play. You bring Garen to play 13 games, snap count, position. We'll figure that out as we go. Push some of the young guys as well, because on some level, like, he's got game experience. He was playing, I get, in that 36-33 game against Oregon in October a couple of years ago. So he was better in the big moments that in the national championship run team. So got the experience, had the injury. He's fully healthy now, so it's good to go there. But when you talk about the 5 offensive linemen, like, Carver Willis is the enigma in the room, because is it going to be the left? Is it going to be the right? We're going to find out in the spring. And I think that's probably the biggest question within the offensive line question.
So I disagree with you on one part there. And I don't think Carver Willis is the enigma of the room. I think he's the solid piece of the room. Is it the left? Is it the right? Who cares? Like, that's the way that I'm looking at it, is you're getting a 5th-year senior who can be a solid tackle. And that's what you're asking for. It would be great if he, plays at an elite level and is an all Big Ten contender. That'd be awesome, right? You're never going to complain about that. But at the same point, where, if you put him at right tackle and Maximus McCree, let's say he starts at left tackle and he plays and looks the way he did before he got hurt. Now, with another year under his belt and a full offseason in the strength program, which, as we noted a couple weeks ago with Jonah Coleman, is something that is really important. And you just, obviously Jonah's been in the program for a couple of years, but just what a couple of months with Tyler Owens and the strength staff has been able to do for some guys that we didn't really see for the majority of these players last year, especially on the offensive line. When you think about Landon Hatchett and Guard Memelar, who obviously is at Central Florida now, but the fact that all these guys have more time to actually get their bodies right is something that I don't think can go understated. And you look at what it could be with Maximus McCree at left tackle, right? Where he looked really solid before he did go down, where he obviously didn't start the year after, just taking a little while to get back into shape after taking the 23 season off, which you don't blame him, right? When you know the story and all the circumstances there, and you just look at the interior, you sat at center with Landon Hatchett, and then it's just a matter of, is it Garen? Is it Zach Henning? Is it Paki Finau? Who else could it be? Is it Michael Watkins in there? Like, whoever ends up at guard, you have a really solid, because A lot of these guys don't have extended game reps where, you talk about Paki, you talk about Zach Henning. They've played a little bit. Paki looked good in the Sun Bowl, but it's not extended reps yet. And you like it. And you like where you're going. You're on the right path. But those guys are going to have a lot to prove this spring against a defensive line that I have a lot of questions about. And mainly it's just, what's that rotation going to look like? Because the biggest pieces on that front that are coming in: Simote Pepa, Anterio Thompson, Ta'ita'i Uiagaleilei, combining that with Zach Durfee, with Russell Davis, with Isaiah Ward, who are all coming back, and Jacob Lane as well, plus everybody else that's in the mix. It's a lot deeper. And you and I have been talking about that, where you like the bodies that are there, but you need to see what it's going to look like.
And how does it mesh with Brian Walters? Like, we know we've been talking about the 5-1-5, but much like Steve Belichick, where you're going to throw it to multiple defense. It's not just the Belichick defense. Ironically, he said it's a UW defense, and one of the kind of hallmarks of UW defense has been, you got pretty good defensive backs, some good linebackers, some good edge rushers, and a couple interior. If you can check all the boxes at the positions, we can name the NFL guys at each position: cornerback, safety, everyone's favorite Rita Vea at nose tackle and things like that. So you cover the entire base, but it's okay. How does that look with what Ryan Walters wants to run? And how many different pictures can you show? Because like you mentioned, you have so much versatility. Ta'ita'i being an inside guy could potentially play outside. You have 3 linebackers, but if you have a 5-1-5, how does that mesh and how does that look? Isaiah Ward, Russell Davis, like all those things. Like, there's so many pieces to the puzzle, again, that you didn't have last spring, and so on some level, how does it all work together?
So I'm really glad you mentioned the 5-1-5, because I want to stay on the defensive line and say one of the biggest questions is, how are these guys going to get better in the trenches this spring? Because that's such an important part of this. And one of the biggest things that I'm really excited about, and for any fan who is able to come out and watch these practices, because they're all open to the public, and for anybody who isn't able to go, we're going to have full recaps of all of them right here on Locked On Huskies. Again, another reason to subscribe. Last shameless plug for the time being. But one of the things that I was talking about with our good buddy Jake Butt the other day, when we were talking a little bit about Ryan Walters, is what the 5-1-5 does. And the 5-1-5 is very good at, like, the whole point of it is to, with some of these big bodies in the middle especially, it can play to them really, really well, because the whole idea is to create one-on-one matchups with the offensive line. And you don't have to see, somebody in the middle like Simote Pepa getting double teamed. And if you're leaving a tight end in for, a 6-man protection, and you're having a little bit more there, it's a different discussion for a different day in terms of just the schematics. But for what a lot of this offensive line is going to look like this spring is, you're going to see Anterio Thompson versus Paki Finau, or Ta'ita'i Uiagaleilei versus Zach Henning. And, you can go down the list of Zach Durfee versus Jerez Party or Carver Willis, whatever. You're going to see a whole lot of that. And it's going to require these guys to improve day in and day out, because you're going to see so many individual matchups, which I'm really excited to watch. And it'll also just say, all right, we saw a little bit last spring. We saw Zach Durfee really thrive last spring before an injury kept him out for the second half of practices. But it's just one of those things that I'm watching and I'm saying, okay, how much are these guys going to improve? Because I think they can really improve in leaps and bounds as they really just learn some of the differences, because what Ryan Walters' scheme is going to do is going to bring the best out of everybody in the trenches at practice.
Absolutely. And I think the interesting thing, and I'm going to kind of segue into a third minor piece that is kind of tie both of these and all these things. And actually, ironically, the second segment together is which freshman among those, because one guy that we didn't mention along the offensive line that no shot to him is Sham Talele. Like, that's a guy who actually could, like, believe me, physically could play like this coming fall. So I'm curious to see, like, whether it's the outside matchups and it's, Tacario Davis versus Marcus Harris, or Audric Harris versus Leroy Bryant. Like, how do those, freshmen start to make an impact, and how do those guys that enrolled early especially make that impact early on? Because, that's the whole point of enrolling early, is making an early impression, getting in that strength program early, getting in all these things, having that extra bonus part of the offseason to where you're not coming in June and just having the summer camp before you get ready for fall camp. All those things play together, because there's not a ton of freshmen along the defensive line that I don't think are going to see some time. But I am curious, like Champ, potentially John Mills, and some other guys that are going to be on campus as offensive linemen. How do those guys show? Because, again, we're not expecting huge things in like 12, 13 games, but they both think could have a role this season on some level.
Oh, absolutely, because there are so many players that we've got our eye on. And we'll get to that right after a message from our friends over at Nissan. The Armada Team of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, our Locked On College basketball experts are picking one team that stands apart from top-seeded stars. The unexpected upsets, these guys showcase their strength and sheer power needed to push their team forward. This week's Armada and clear-cut Team of the Week is the Arkansas Razorbacks. Despite losing their first 5 SEC games, Coach Cal's Hogs fought their way through the most rugged conference in college basketball to not only make the NCAA tournament, but knock off back-to-back national champion and Hall of Fame coaches and route to the Sweet 16. They accomplished all this without their second leading scorer, Boogie Fland, for most of SEC play without leading scorer and rebounder Anterio so far in the NCAA tournament. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer, and that's exactly what the Arkansas Razorbacks have done here. It's clear that our Team of the Week is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of Nissan's outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Lars, there are a lot of guys that we want to keep our eye on this spring. We just mentioned a lot of them with the trenches, so we're probably going to move away from that a little bit, but I want to stay in the front seven because as I watch what this linebacker competition is going to be, Jacob Manu is somebody who I'm interested in where, we know he's probably not going to do much this spring coming off the torn ACL that he suffered in October. But I look at X-Ray Alexander, and we've had a couple of conversations about him over the past couple of weeks in terms of, hey, he could walk down and play outside linebacker a little bit in certain scenarios if you need him to. He looks like he's going to be just a big physical presence at inside linebacker as well. And I'm just curious to see what that's going to look like and how he might split time with Buda Alukta early in camp, especially.
Well, because in a way, and I remember talking to X about this when we got to meet with him separate from the Girl Scout experience, which was also, I will say, like you said it perfectly where you said, what was he, how did you describe him? Because it was perfect where like he's an experience. Like you can really like feel the impact that he has just when you're around him. Like, he's a fun, energetic guy. And so I think the way that segues on the field, he has no fear in bringing it. Whereas Buda, I think, might be the kind of, I'm not saying he's more of a playmaker, just one where it's like if you're going to say there's a one linebacker, X might be more of that 4 or 5, walk him down and kind of come off the edge than you would Buda, who's going to be more your center fielder. I'm curious to see how does Buda kind of, I don't want to say get better because that's just too cheap a way, but we saw what he did at Wazoo, which is he did have an impact, but, the reference to missed tackles does exist. And so I'm curious, how can Ryan Walter's scheme and being that potential one either benefit him or maybe like how does he get used in different ways? Maybe is he, a guy that can also walk down and then, maybe Jacob Manu, again, would not expect him to play this spring, but from what he told me and, be ready for fall camp, that's a guy where, hey, if you can have both those guys end up proving that they can walk down in addition to playing the one, now you have 3 guys. You have so much more versatility at that linebacker spot, even though you theoretically are listing one guy. Sure.
No, I like where you're going with that. There's so many guys that I want to take a second to talk about Tacario Davis because I feel like it's cheating because who isn't going to want to keep their eye on a potential first-round pick at corner, right? But I think that one of the most fun things that you and I got to watch last spring was not the emergence of Denzel Boston because we'd seen him play really well in practices before, but just the establishment of himself as a true alpha receiver when he had to go against Ephesians Prysock in spring practice last year. Ephesians Prysock is a good player. And I like his talent a lot. Tacario Davis is a potential first-round pick. So the old football adage of the iron sharpens iron thing, there is a legitimate chance that the number 1 wide receiver and the number 1 cornerback in the 2026 NFL draft are practicing across from each other. And I mean that go look at some of the receivers in this upcoming draft class. Denzel has an opportunity to be up there with the best of them if he does choose to enter the 26th draft. And same thing with Tacario Davis, who obviously will be because this is his last year of eligibility. So I wanted to combine those two into one because those are arguably the 2 best players on the team as of right now. But you can't not mention what kind of impact that might have with those 2 guys running against each other.
I just love how superstitious you are to the point where you still had to hedge that Tacario Davis comment with probably will be a first-round pick and then followed it up with, because you're absolutely right about this, number 1 wide receiver and number 1 corner. Like if he's the number 1 corner, the number 1 corner ain't going day 2. Like that's just not a thing that would, but I just wanted to say that because it's like, no, like, you have a first-round cornerback and a first-round wide receiver. Like that is the type of caliber. What it made me think of was Rome in 22. It's like, okay, Rome, we knew he was going to be the guy, knew he was going to be like, now it's your time to last year was Denzel saying, hey, I am a guy. And now it's taking that next step. And in a way, I'm going to pair this with, because you're absolutely right about this, what is the impact that Tacario has on Ephesians?
I like
it's one thing to have the one-on-one with your alpha and your alpha, but the whole point of Ryan Walter's scheme is, well, you got 2 islands, not just one. It's, you don't just have the big island in Hawaii. You got a couple more islands out there. And, especially running a 5 defensive back scheme, you're going to have potentially one more in the nickel, but we'll leave that for a different discussion, because what is Omari's veteran presence, where this is why, again, it wasn't to knock Kevin Green. It wasn't to knock – Rasheed does have experience, but nowhere near what Omari has. And even Jonte Cook, where had he come in and not done – anyways, long story short, Jonte Cook was here and Omari Evans wasn't. I don't think he has that veteran presence that Omari brings, especially from a program like Penn State and James Franklin, where it's like, hey, look, if anything, you might not have a ton of receiving yards, but you're going to learn how to be a leader. And I think not that Denzel didn't have that, but having somebody else who can almost take that burden off, kind of like Ephesians, where, hey, we're going to bring in Tacario, so it's not just you being the 1A. It's, hey, yeah, you're 1-1. You guys are now like you were in Arizona. I think having both of those, having that second established element is just as vital as having a Tacario and Denzel.
So because everything is about Omari Evans is great. Let's take that into the backfield, where watching Adam Mohammed is going to be really fun. And I know these are all guys we've talked about. There are a couple other freshmen that I want to make sure we get to, but this is another one that I know we can't not talk about, right? Where the impact of year 2 of Adam Mohammed is going to be so much fun to watch, because he's somebody who showed just all the traits of an elite running back last season, where it's not just the speed, it's not just the strength, it's the vision, it's the wiggle between the tackles, it's all those little things. It's the ability to, at his size, turn into an elite pass blocker. He really has that kind of ability in the backfield. So seeing what kind of role he might have in year 2 alongside DeMond, alongside Jonah Coleman, are all things that I'm really intrigued to watch, because he's somebody where, like Denzel Boston was the MVP of spring camp last year. Like, is that an award people are giving out? No, but it's something that needed to be talked about, where if Adam comes away as most improved, or even just as like the most valuable player that we watched this spring, that's not something I'm going to be surprised about.
No, and I think it's almost what you would expect from Scotty Graham, where that room, sure. The whole point in developing guys is it's not taking away carries from Jonah. It's, well, Jonah's still going to have, if Jonah averages 5, 6, 7 yards per carry, that means by proxy he can have less carries because he's still doing more damage. It's not 2-3 yards in a cloud of dust where we're going to turn and hand it to who's the Oklahoma State running back was like, hey, we're going to give him 51 carries.
Talking about Ollie Gordon.
Yeah, where it's like, hey, we're just going to ride this guy till the wheels fall off. Where it's like, okay, no, that's not the pro style system. And even if you have a bell cow, you still want to give him maybe 20, 22 carries. That's kind of just the modern version of a bell cow, and that's exactly why Adam should get more carries. And that's also why, one thing Scotty always talks about is, you have to be a pass blocker first. Because if it's a pro-style offense, if we're off play action, that means, either you're splitting out or at some point on some level you're blocking. So get that down first, get the scheme down. And, Adam Mohammed clearly, I was cheating. Speaking of cheating, when I made the prediction that Adam Mohammed would play all 13 games last season, that was kind of cheating because it's again, barring injury, which again, that kid is built like a brick, where I'm not saying he's never going to get hurt, but he takes good care of himself to the point where it's a guy who's going to be durable and proved as a freshman, hey, in the Big Ten, I can be durable, which again, also shout out to Scotty Graham's evaluation where, hey, I saw that guy at Apollo, not Mater Dei, not St. John Bosco, not IMG, not the easy schools where it's again, that's no slight to the big schools. I'm just saying talent is where it is, and Scotty knows how to develop it. So kind of seeing all that, and similarly with Jordan Washington in that same kind of mold where somebody's going to emerge as that third back. Obviously, two different types of backs in that sense. But how does the usage of Jordan Washington change? Where we didn't see it last season, but we thought the kick game, being kind of that split out receiver that can do kind of a number of different things. What does his usage look like going into year 2 versus, last season it was just, hey, I'm just trying to get all my freshmen involved and we'll see how it goes. Where Jordan not playing a ton of games didn't really prove to be a surprise.
So I'm glad you mentioned special teams when you talk about Jordan Washington, because that's something that I really do think we'll see him take more of a step forward with this year. And we saw him doing a little bit last season, but now, Keith Reynolds is gone. He was the guy who's doing that. Jason Robinson was the scout team, special teams MVP last season. He's gone. So you need somebody to step up and take that role because Cam Davis was returning kicks for a little while. He's not here anymore. So you kind of run through the list of guys who were working out as kick and punt returners. A lot of them aren't there. And, I look at punt return especially, and I say, that's not somewhere you want Denzel Boston being for the entirety of the season. And especially when you have somebody with elite speed like Jordan Washington, why not find a way to utilize him there? There's one more guy I want to mention. And Lars, it's a position that Washington was really, really thin at last season. And that's Cade Eldridge, where I'm just so curious to see what this tight end situation is going to look like, because Quentin Moore is going to be the leader in that room. And then Decker DeGraff really proved himself in a big way last season. So I'm curious to see what a second season of Decker is going to look like, where he might have improved over the course of the offseason. And then Cade Eldridge is a guy where we've said it before, we're going to say it again. Jedd Fisch loves using his tight ends in a variety of roles. And that's something that I think Cade has an ability to utilize, especially because Baron Naone is not here for spring practice. Like, he's going to be here in the summer, which is okay. He's down there trying to win a 4th state championship of baseball in Oregon. That's awesome. He's a former baseball player. Always love to hear that. Shout out. But Cade Eldridge, after spending 2 years at USC, and you and I know this very well, you're not going to get the best coaching at tight end at USC. Like, that's just not something that Lincoln Riley utilizes very heavily. So what can Jordan Paopao and Jedd Fisch do with him? Really curious to find out what that might be. Lars, we're going to get to more on Cade Eldridge and all the tight ends on the other side of the break, because we've got a message from our friends over at Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades. Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with the complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use the promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
So, Lars, one of the biggest things, we're going to start with tight ends, but the biggest difference, and I think both you and I are looking at, is, you said it earlier, there's real depth with this team now. You're not still looking to add 20, 25 players.
Well, not only that, but what does depth allow you to do? With Jedd Fisch especially, get creative. One thing that I was thinking of was, well, how many times did we see a 3 tight end personnel last year? Not very much.
Ever. Voight Tanufi was like that 3rd tight end at times, yeah.
Which makes me wonder, imagine Decker DeGraff as a fullback, Cade Eldridge as a fullback, both as a blocker, and then because of Decker more so, you get creative in the pass game, you could do some things like that. I wouldn't be surprised to, again, it's just a hunch. It's not, I'm not doing the binoculars, I'm not Connor Stallions, but I wouldn't be surprised with that depth that you mentioned, you can do more things with those guys where, you're talking about struggles at the goal line. Well, why not show that you, instead of handing it to Voight Tanufi, hand it to Decker, see what happens, or better yet, play action and, maybe Damon hits Decker this time instead of, just overshooting about like 6 inches. But with that being said, because I know they've been working on that, like, take advantage of the depth. It's not just, hey, like, yeah, we have Quinn Moore and a veteran, so we're going to try and use Decker and then Cade, and we'll kind of just mix and match, and snap counts will be interesting. It's like, no, get creative with it. Don't just have the depth for having depth.
No, I like where you're going with that because that is just the most important thing, right? Where when we were talking about this segment, we're like, hey, what else can we talk about outside of depth? That was the thing we kept coming back to because it's so important. where, last year when you're rolling out walk-on offensive linemen, I don't mean that, to knock them in any way, shape, or form. It's just that's with the second team offense, that's tough because you only had 7-8 scholarship offensive linemen. And to those guys, as Jedd Fisch has reminded us plenty of times, were coming off torn ACLs. So it's really hard to do everything that you might want to when you just can't field a full roster. So it's going to be really nice that that's not the case this season. And, we spent a lot of time talking about the offensive line, so we don't have to necessarily talk about it there. But another just spot where I'm really interested with that is at quarterback. Because last year we saw Will Rogers obviously take the majority of the reps, Damon flash whenever he was in there. And now that we're heading into a season where we know what the quarterback situation is, just like we kind of knew last year, but certainly very, very different, right? Where it's like, hey, we know Damon's going to be in at times. Now it's, all right, Damon has the keys of the kingdom. He's going to do what he wants, and it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. It's all right. And I'm just curious to see, how often might we see, Keeney McMillan or Dash Byerly get in there with the first team and just work on reps, probably mid to late in the spring, but just to see what that looks like, because I think that could be a lot of fun and something where, as Jedd Fisch tries to sell this to spend a 10-second recruiting thing here to sell the program to somebody like Brady Smigel or Sione Cajo in the 2027 class and just sell to some of these quarterbacks. Like, those are things that matter.
Well, so that was exactly what I was going to say. The way you sell that is like I mentioned earlier, where it's you have 4 quarterbacks, so you have the development of 2, plus you have Kai Horton, who's going to be kind of helping. And I'm not just saying he's going to serve as a mentor, because obviously Kai came here to learn and develop, and again, that's the whole point of coming to learn the pro style system. But obviously, he understands the assignment. He's not coming here to start. Obviously, like you said, Damon has the keys indeed to the house, so it's, how can I help Damon? How can we, make this work together? But what it does is it sends a message, like you said, to Brady Smigel, where, like I said, little birdie said April is going to be a good month. And it's not necessarily a surprise, but I'm just saying, when I said there's going to be some good news coming in late March, and now, obviously we had the episode with CJ Levin to go check that out, where he talked about his commitment to UW and all those sorts of things. Maybe that Cali Wave continues. So as you go throughout April, it's like, wait, look at the development of Tristan Keeney McMillan. Look at Dash. Look at how these guys are all developing, and think, Damon's doing his thing, watching his ascent like Michael Penix. Kai, you kind of play the Dylan Morris role of like, hey, we need still a good veteran, help learn, mesh the team, all these sorts of things, come up with new ideas. And then we have the future. And then if you're Brady, it's like, cool, like I can come to Washington and Dash is going to be doing, I don't need to start as a freshman. I'm good with that. Like, I'm trying to get developed. And you literally, you come out to practice if you're, Kyle, and you see, wow, freshman, senior, sophomore, like everybody's getting better and everybody's getting developed because you have the offensive line talent, because you have the receiver talent, Marcus Harris, Chris Lawson, Desi Does won't come until June, but Raiden Vinesbright.
Desmond Roebuck.
Desmond Roebuck was the other one, exactly. And so you just look at the talent, and then, you had Julian McMahon, all those sorts of things, and Quade Carr, and you just look at that list and think, wow, everybody's helping and getting developed. And that's why, it used to be a rarity where it's okay, we got, 5, early enrollee freshmen coming in. That's a big deal. Like, those 5 are going to be ahead of everybody else. Now it's like,
sure,
the class is already here. Like, the other half of it's not. But in a way, you also got to you don't want all 32 coming in spring camp, because now it's like, wait, now we got to have a whole new, it's almost like OTAs, where like you got the rookies that come in for rookie camp, and then mini camp, and then you come back for training camp. It's like, okay, like some, yes, but not, you don't want all the rookies coming in at once. And so I think you have that progression, and it all starts with the whole built around program and development.
So I like where you're going with that. Sorry, there's another thing that I like that kind of goes hand in hand with that. So I want to switch gears here a little bit, because it breeds the number one part of Jedd Fisch's program that he talks about. When sometimes I get exhausted by using some of these buzzwords that, he talks about quite frequently, because I feel like the everydayers are sitting there and they're like, yeah, we've heard, him say this before, say that before, but it all really does matter when you talk about a college football program, because it's instilling that every single day. It's just saying, hey, these are the things that matter every single day. And the one that he talks about the most in that light is competition, and that the best players will play. And that's such a big part of this, right? Where you look at it and it's, hey, Dylan Robinson looks better than whatever corner you want to say that's been here 2-3 years. Like, hey, yeah, that's okay, because that's what we want. We want the best players to play and the best players to establish themselves. And like, let's say, to use somebody I'm really high on just as an example, where you and I expect that Alex McLaughlin is going to come in and play really well. But who's to say that Raheem Wright doesn't come in and just look better? Or Rashawn Clark doesn't come in and just look better? Like, these are all things that are very possible. And when you breed this element of competition at every single position and you have the actual depth to back it up, which was certainly not the case last season, because you had so many guys that were just new to college football in terms of, just for one reason or other, whether it be guys in the 24 recruiting class or guys that were taking a step up from the FCS to the FBS, or were just completely new to the roster. Like, those are all things that, yeah, it's nice when you can have that competition, but that doesn't necessarily mean as much where it's, hey, yeah, this guy is pushing this experienced player for playing time. This guy who has looked good really just on this level before. I was going to just, I don't want to use the FCS to FBS example again, but somebody who looked really good at another Power 4 program is getting pushed. For example, just another one, just to keep throwing these out there, X-Ray Alexander with Donovan Robinson, right? Like, just as you continue to look down this light, and I'm not saying this to slight any one particular player, but the competition aspect of all of this is something that we didn't necessarily see very much of last year, because as much as there was still an element of mystery to the roster, we knew what it was going to look like for the most part, where it's like, hey, this guy's established, that guy's established. We know Will Rogers is the quarterback. We know Jonah Coleman is going to take, probably X percentage of the carries at running back. Like, there was so much of that even with this team, there are still certainties with some of those same names, right? DeMond, Jonah, Denzel, Tacario, Davis. But there's so much of, hey, if this plays out in a certain way, we could be looking at something very, very different. And I'm really excited to see what that might look like.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't throw out Riley Dillon down. Guys,
Yeah.
I'll make that bold prediction right now. He'll have the Adam Mohammed treatment. He's playing in all 13 games. 13
I like that.
And I think now what role to be determined. But again, that's the whole point. You get these talent. It's 4-star talent testing. Caleb, why is it not names escaping me?
Caleb Presley.
Thank you. And Rayshon Clark, 2 4-star, all 3 4-stars. You're testing each other. You're leveling up, and it's not the one's worse than the other. It's just that's the whole point in competition, like you said. Like, it's all building on each other. Where it ties into recruiting. Where 2 kids from the state of Washington, 1 from Arizona, both hotbeds of the state from Washington when it comes to recruiting. Figure it out when you all get here. And by the way, we'll find a way. Whether it's special teams, backup, you progress and come back in fall camp, and hey, wow, like, grew a lot over the summer. Ryland took another step, all those sorts of things. Like, this is where it starts. And again, as Jimmy Doherty would say, started a couple of weeks ago when they first got the team and, really started training and doing all those sorts of things. But again, April 2nd, right? April 1st, April 2nd, when spring camp begins, that's when the official date actually got to be. Put the preparation in. Now let's see where you're at.
Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the videos for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We got so much more fun stuff coming for you throughout the offseason, so please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day, so make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section, and if you're audio only, please, if it's 5-star reviews, it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Wednesday.